I see it all the time. People I coach have people that are not coachable. And it's like, you got to stop right there and say, wait a minute, I'm here to help. You've got to put the defenses down. You've got to listen. You've got to ask follow-up questions.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And I was tempted. I'm tempted to go down the political Colorado road and talk about wolves. But I ain't. And the reason I was going to talk about wolves is because Jan Rutherford, our guest joining us, good friend, long time coming dude, is joining us on the show. And he was just talking about the dangers of living in Colorado and the evil mountain lions hanging out at your fire pit, right?
Yeah, I think it's a privilege, to have that wildlife near us.
Oh yeah. Well, it makes you be a responsible pet owner is what it makes you be, doesn't it? Yeah, Where's
absolutely.
Fluffy?
Yeah. What's that joke about the guy who keeps buying new outdoor cats and the neighbor's like, I think at this point you're just feeding the mountain lions cats, bud.
We've had a couple of neighbors in the past.
I know the one across the street.
Yeah. Hey, have you seen our little kitten that we let outside at night?
No, I've seen the hawk about 3 times, though.
Yeah. Heard the coyotes yelping. Yeah, well, that's what happens. Nature is nature, folks. And Jan, man, I wanted to jump into, I want to. Hell, good grammar. Where's Miss Odenball, Camden? I would like to jump into the thing I always find interesting when I have and I didn't mention this, another brother from the regiment, that is something that, Q course, ODA time sort of thing that you're like, man, that is the core thing that continues to help me drive through with my leadership business and helping grow other leaders.
Yeah. Otis, it's probably not what you'd expect. I had the privilege of working with 2 Medal of Honor recipients and a former prisoner of war for 5 years who wrote a book about it. I had phenomenal role models and what leadership should look like. And that really set the tone. And it also, unfortunately, made me frustrated a lot because most of the leaders that I encounter don't measure up to these folks that I experienced when I was just 19 years old.
Yeah.
That's when I worked for them. I mean, I got my beret when I was 19 and 2 months old.
So he was the definition of an SF baby.
I don't think you can even go through the Q course when you're that young. I went through most of the Q course as an 18-year-old, not even 19. So, having exposure to really phenomenal leaders early on is really, what changed my life. And at the same time, I was also exposed to some people that did not have a moral compass at all. You've encountered those folks. And I reflect back on, my life could have really went in a couple different directions. And, luckily the people back then, they took the time. When I was at a turning point, whether I was going to stay in or get out and go to college in ROTC and be in a SF reserve unit, I had really good counsel and that helped kind of steer me in the right direction. And none of these leaders told me what to do. They really asked great questions and really helped guide me. And I felt like at the time, I remember I had like 6 or 8 different options. Some of them involved staying in and some involved getting out. And I remember, I was really lucky to have some people that were really, took time. I mean, if you think about it, and this didn't happen back then, I was a buck sergeant, E5, and these O5s took time to, take me to lunch. I mean, back then that just didn't happen. It just It just didn't happen.
What do you think? Because what I'm hearing, and this is so interesting. What do you think was the indicator? Because you're walking this path, and these dudes said, "Ooh, let me grab him, pull him in, and make sure he's going to continue down the proper path." What do you think were some indicators maybe that they saw that led to that mentoring, that relationship?
I think it's a really good question. Because I think, there's people that attract mentors and there's people that don't. Will say, I've never had a mentor. And I think the thing that attracts mentors, if I go back and again, not to pat myself on the back, but I think they saw that I was ambitious and that I was curious. I think even back then I was probably more interested in hearing about their experience and getting their perspective than I was talking about myself. Because at that point in my life, I hadn't done anything. I survived the Q course. I didn't quit. I survived it. And that's, how I earned the Green Beret. I just didn't quit. Even though there was a lot of times during that course I wanted to quit, believe me. It was, for me, it was really hard physically. The mental part, which really dropped more people than the physical part, I didn't find that difficult. But man, physically, it chewed me up.
I'm curious, talking about like the kind of like talent ID to give you the mentorship type of thing. What do you think the coachability factor has to do with that? Because in my rugby space, that's a huge thing. Guys coming in as freshmen who's not that great. I'm like, oh my god, he listens. I will pour my heart into him for 4 years. He'll be a great player at the end of it. Do you think that plays in much into the Army leadership development system, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, I do. And I see it all the time. People I coach have people that are not coachable. And it's like, you got to stop right there and say, wait a minute, I'm here to help. You've got to put the defenses down. You've got to listen. You've got to ask follow-up questions. Again, it's hard to remember how I was, 40 plus years ago. But my guess is, when people gave me feedback, I probably asked some follow-up questions and thanked them. I doubt I got defensive because, I knew I was a knucklehead. I didn't know anything. I was 19. This part of my brain was far from developed.
Yeah, well, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking about the number of times you probably hit your head on the ground during a jump. No.
You know what, Otis? Most of the time, if nobody was around and looking, because I'm light, I did a stand up.
That's what I was just going to say. I was like, damn, I forgot about that part because you know me, I was a ton of bricks coming down.
Well, I remember being on the drop zone, and especially at night, and I would go boop, and I would hear, I'd hear all these grunts, and I'm like, man, sucks to be big.
Yeah. There are advantages when you look for them, aren't there?
Yep.
That's a funny piece of perspective because I've gotten your perspective on that, Dad, and it has made me so much more sympathetic to whenever I see somebody fall in a parachute and not land well. And I'm like, hey, no, I've heard it's really, really, really hard to do. Apparently, only if you're a big old stack of bricks, I guess, out there.
My problem was if it was windy and cold. Before you had the kind where you could release like this, you had to squeeze it like metal, and it was freezing. And there were times when it was so cold, I couldn't squeeze it, and I'm getting drug, on the ground, and I'm like, and my head's hitting rocks, and I'm trying to get that thing released. That's
oh my gosh,
that's what I remember about being little. Because you just, if you were big, you didn't get drug all over the drop zone when you landed, but if you were little, you did.
Yeah, back to that ton of bricks when I hit, I didn't get drug. It has to be really, really bad for me to get drug around the DZ. In that space of getting bodies beat up. You mentioned the mental aspect wasn't hard, but the physical was. What do you think the origin? That mental toughness. I mean, like you said, 19 years old, dude. It's like, where did that mental toughness come from to push through the physical stress?
Yeah, you're getting into the psychoanalysis, Otis. which is fine. It's because it's interesting. Where did that come from? I didn't play sports in high school. I was in the band because I was so little. I weighed 65 pounds as a freshman, and I weighed 101 as a senior. So I didn't play football in the South. We did not play football in the South being that little. So, but I think being small, I think there is something to the fact that, if you're small, you're probably gonna be a little scrappy. And, when I reflect back, all the talk about bullying these days, I don't think I was ever bullied. I think I was like every other kid. I think I was picked on, but I don't think I was bullied because I stood up for myself. And, when I went in, I had a couple people telling me I was going to do great, and I had more than a couple people telling me I was going to fail. And I think both that yin and yang of motivation really served me. I didn't want to let the people down that said I was going to make it, and I wanted to prove something to the people that didn't. And honestly, and this is going to sound really corny, but when it was really bad, I just pictured me donning the beret. I went to the ceremony, and I'm like, I want to be at that ceremony. I want to do this. I want to put that beret on, and that's what kept me going. Those three things.
One of the interesting things when people talk about like leadership and like, what does a leader look like and those kind of things. One thing I remember from a old professor of mine at the U of A talking leadership, Dr. Torres, who we've talked about before, Dad. One thing I remember that was really interesting that he talked about was this idea of, it's like, well, there's kind of these like pre-qualifying traits a little bit for being a leader. You don't have to be this, but it's like, it tends to track this direction. And the two he talked about was men, because our voice is deeper and it tends to carry a bit more, and being tall because people just tend to go, oh, we listen to him.
Yep.
Now, talking about those as a little bit of a like self-selection, you kind of push you that direction. I'm really curious with your perspective of, if we're kind of splitting it into those two boxes, Otis and I, we're big and tall. We kind of get forced into the leadership. We might not be as good as leaders. You had to choose it. You had to put in the work and those kind of things there. I would love to hear your perspective on that piece of logic there.
Well, you're right. I mean, all the psychological test of who's the leader, ask a bunch of kids and you show a bunch of men, and the ones that are tall, they'll say they're the leaders. I mean, that's how we're wired. Big, strong. That's who we look up to. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell, in one of his books, and again, Malcolm Gladwell, not Jan Rutherford, said, to become a CEO in a corporate America, it's easier if you're a minority woman than if you're a small white male. Malcolm Gladwell said it, not me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, there's a lot of assumptions that are made. Unfortunately, what executive presence is, it's appearance, it's communication, and it's gravitas. Well, when it comes to appearance, you got to work with what you got. And when I got in the business world, I read Dress for Success, and I realized being short and being really young looking at the time, I had to dress really conservatively. Wingtips and a red tie and a white shirt, and so I had to work
do the whole hour thing, huh?
Well, I had to, because that's, and then I had to work on my ability to communicate. And then the gravitas is the confidence. And I'll tell you, that's the greatest gift I got from the Army and going through Special Forces is, here I was, I was a little bit cocky, but not really confident. I'm like, oh, I can't play football. I wasn't this great athlete in high school, but going through Special Forces at such a young age really made me feel for the rest of my life that I could do anything I set my mind to. I mean, I did something really hard, physically, mentally, emotionally. And so, I think that if you carry yourself with that confidence, that gravitas, it doesn't matter how tall you are, how short you are. It doesn't matter. The only time that I really ever feel short is on the train at DIA at the airport. I can see the reflection. We're all standing, and I'm like, man, I'm short. I'm like
that much taller?
I'm looking in between people's shoulder blades, and that's the only time I honestly ever think I even think about being small.
Yeah, that reminds me of being on the train in Tokyo.
You probably were. Everybody was here.
I'm holding up here, and I've got people's heads tucked underneath me here.
Well, in 1987, I was in Korea. in Seoul, and I was walking down the street, and I could see the top of everybody's head. And this is 1987. I don't think it's like that now. But I remember it going, oh, this is what it must be like. These are my people.
These are my people.
Yeah. I don't think, I'm sure if I went back to Seoul, people would not be that short now.
I'm curious how you think that played into any battles you had with imposter syndrome over the years. Because I think, from my understanding, with a lot of people for imposter syndrome, it's not necessarily that they are having these issues, but it's more so like, I'm doing well and I feel like I shouldn't be doing well. So I'd be curious. It's like, you you're almost on the opposite end of the spectrum with that. It's a different perspective there.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I don't ever remember feeling like I don't belong where I'm at. I've kind of always felt like I've earned where I'm at. But I will tell you this: when I started teaching leadership at the University of Colorado, Denver, a former retired 2-star sat down with me, who was the chairman, vice chair at CH2M Hill, and he grabbed me by the forearm and he said, "So you're going to teach leadership, Jan, huh?" I said, "Yeah." I was about 42 years old. And he said, "Are you willing to face your own hypocrisy?"
Ooh.
And so anytime I get up in front of a group of people, whether it's a workshop or a keynote, I think about that. Not that I'm an imposter and I don't belong there, but I think about the hypocrisy of everything I'm teaching and preaching. The wisdom that I have is because I failed and made mistakes and screwed up. I mean, and I'm like, well, who am I to get up there and tell people how to do this? The reason I can tell you it is because I screwed it up so many times. And so I think about that more than I think about being an imposter. Like, I've got to face my own hypocrisy. I've got to be humble. And I've got to remember, up here telling people what to do is easy. Being in the seat where you've got to produce results through other people, that's hard. That's always hard.
Let's jump into that a bit deeper, because I think that's a huge thing that people deal with. In that, I always joke it's the heal thyself doctor. So how do you handle that? Because that is such a great point. And I love what he said, willing to face your own hypocrisy. That is, I would have pulled my arm back and go, "Damn, sir."
Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, I think it's just, you've got to just remind yourself that, we're all a work in progress to the day we die. We are. And, what I put in the back of my first book was, one, I wasn't knee deep in hand grenade pins at any point in my life. I said that the really great warriors came before me, came after me. I served during peacetime, during the Reagan era. So I said that, but I also said that we're all a work in progress, and I'm better than I used to be, not nearly as good as I'd like to be. And, what I'm trying to do to this day is stay relevant. And I do it through the podcasts that I run and talking to people and interviewing people, through reading and listening, and also my clients. Because as an executive coach, I teach and preach, but as you know, when you teach and preach, you probably learn more than the students, than the people, the clients. And what to me is really fun these days is seeing the patterns and trying to connect the dots of, where's all this coming from? The Gallup survey just came out yesterday and said, we're more disengaged than ever. Managers are the problem. Nothing new. We're overwhelmed, disengaged, and, it's a big problem. It's steadily going down. It's not like, hey, this is status quo. This is how it's always been. We have a really big leadership problem. And, what I think about is one of the best questions you can ask as someone that is trying to be a better leader is, what makes a leader? Mm. And I will try to answer that question until the day I die, and I mentioned at the beginning, I was around these great Medal of Honor recipients, and what made a great leader, it was interesting. They were great leaders for the military. I don't know if they would have been successful business guys. I don't know. I've seen commandos on my Crucible expeditions that were super effective for 20 years in combat perform terribly, and just hiking up a mountain and not adapt to the situation. So to me, this goes back to just staying curious, really, what's going on, and staying adaptable. Because, somebody said yesterday, the world changed 5 years ago. I mean, it's changed in the last year. And if you're leading the same way you were in 2020, you are probably not effective at all. So, it's kind of like people say, would, some of the coaches of the NFL, back in the 60s be good coaches today? Well, maybe if they adapted,
Yeah.
but you couldn't run a team, today the way you did in the 60s, for sure.
Talking about the patterns there, I love the phrase. I have no idea where this quote comes from, or even if it's a quote, or if I'm just making it up. But the idea of the history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
I think it's a similar kind of thing when you're talking about with these patterns, is that they don't look the exact same, but there's usually some key elements that are the same there. What's your process for identifying that? Because I think that's it. That is quite frankly, I think the key to staying a great leader, not just being great and then kind of falling off. The key is, identifying those patterns.
Well, I'll probably be more specific, Camden, than maybe you want, so I can go back and revisit. But the way I see, most of the leadership challenges at a tactical level is people are spending time here. They want to spend time here. So it's a time management issue. The other big issue is people managing up, sideways, down, whatever it is. So it's time and it's people. Well, I can address that very tactically and coach people. Spend your time here. Here's how you coach people. Here's how you manage up. Here's things to do. But when I start to see that all the people I'm working with have the same issues with time and people, then I have to basically say, what's going on with the environment? Mm-hmm. How do I push and pull the levers that are going to create a better environment that'll produce the behaviors I want? And a real basic example is a terrible intersection. What I could do is basically say, I'm going to put everybody in driver's ed. That'll fix it. They don't know how to drive. Or I could say, you know what, we need a traffic cop there during rush hour. That's micromanagement. Or I could say, you know what, this intersection should be a roundabout. If we put a roundabout in there, we will fix all the accidents. And I think in leadership, we have to sometimes look at the environment and say, do we need to alter the environment, design something with regard to structure, process, systems, incentives, people? Do we need to design the environment better that's going to produce the behaviors instead of just, brute force all the time? Hey, person, change. Hey, person over here, change. We have a capacity to change, but it's not, unlimited. We've got to really, as leaders, really sometimes look at our job as being designers, not just developers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that also steps into the unsolicited advice type of thing, right? It's like no one's going to just change because you walked up and shake your finger at them. If they come to you and you build that kind of environment, then it's much better off. Yeah. One of the things I want to drill in on with that is to take that roundabout example, right? So I love what you're saying of breaking it down into the key components. My thought there, to add a layer to it, is how do you make sure that key component is updated? And this is going to be some arbitrary, stupid future example I'm going to use just to get the analogy out. But it's like, we're talking the roundabout there. It's like, well, Jan, we could use this new thing where the cars actually hover and they go over each other and there's this little jump, this whole thing. It's 2025. Come on, we're in the future. It's not roundabouts. That's old school stuff. How do you make sure you're updating to those new interventions that are, again, really the same thing, but the new version?
Well, you're getting into decisions. Mm-hmm. Which, if you think about strategy, if you, again, from a business world perspective, the fundamental questions are, what business are you in? Who's your customer? Mm-hmm. And that is really the essence of your strategy. And then based on that, it's all a series of decisions as far as what are the priorities. And I was just talking to my son, and I was saying that, that the easy decisions that are going to come to your desk, you can do with a T-chart. Pros, cons, good, bad, black, white, whatever it is, that's easy. The hard decisions, like you're talking about, are you've got to really evaluate based on criteria, based on your core values. Is it strategic? Is it best for the customer? Is this profitable? Is it safe? What are the criteria and what priority order instead of pros and cons? And I see this mistake all the time in the business world. Everything is binary. It's either good or bad, do it or not do it. And it's not well thought out. The hard decisions, first off, don't need to be made fast, and they need to be made thoroughly and transparently. Like, what's the criteria? What's the process? And I think if you do that, you'll decide whether you need to have hovercraft, or if you're like, that's in the future because we don't have the cash flow, or whatever it might be. Or if we do that, it's going to delay something else that's important. It's like really understanding the big picture. And that's what we want leaders to start to do, is think strategically. If I were the CEO, how would my actions affect, the big picture? But most CEOs and people at the C level are leading people that stay in silos. And it's not just the people in the silos' fault. It's the leaders that aren't, basically operating with the concept that people support what they help create, that we need input from them to make these decisions. That needs to be part of the process.
But before you go, Dad, I want to add one thing on that, because I think this is a good, really applicable piece. We've used this internally with Tribe and Purpose. It comes from one of my old business partners and professors of Dr. Quello, of going through basically identifying all of the different metrics of success that you want to look at, or even, negative things also. And you go through and basically weight each one of it's like 1, 0.5, 0.25, 0.1 of importance. You go through and you arbitrarily go, hey guys, what do we think? We want to give this a 10? 10, cool. Okay, 8. And you go down like that, go through your weights there, and it gives you a number that you can go off of while just kind of arbitrarily throwing numbers at the board. So I always throw that out, because when you get stuck on those multivariate things, like we use that for grow systems for agriculture, where you're like, do we want to put on a roof over here, parking lot over there, this, like all these weird variables you can't really measure. So throw that out there, because I think it's a really applicable way to throw this together for a business.
No, that's good. That's good insight. That's good insight.
Yeah, well, it always reminds me of the schoolhouse course of action analysis matrix, where there was even, I don't remember how we did it now. It's because it was it was very academic, so it was very unrealistic in the real world. But it was you compared all the criteria to each criteria, and there was a formula that came out of that. When you did that, this one's more important than this one, and that one's more, and it spit out the multiplication factors of each of them. So I think when you go back to the realism of, in the business world, how critical is the decision, and how much time can I take to do it? When you have that sort of time, unlike most military operations, when you have that sort of time, you can do that with the criteria. Is that something that you help your clients understand how they can do that?
Yeah, the decision. If I was, again, going back to the patterns, the things that I'm seeing right now, we're terrible at delegating. We're terrible about making time to always recruit, because, again, big part of leadership is attracting talent, and people usually don't look for talent until they have an opening, or they don't fire somebody that needs to be fired because they don't have a backup. So that's going on. Then, again, decision making, either it's too slow, or it's bottlenecked because it's all at the top. So decision making is a big problem. The way that we set up and do meetings. Meetings have been screwed up for a long time, and we always think meetings are bad. It's like, well, meetings are how you get stuff done and how you come to consensus and you collaborate and you learn. But the bad thing about meetings are just poorly designed and poorly run. So there's a lot of things, that are going on. The hard thing, to me, when you're really running an organization, whether it's nonprofit, military, for-profit, is focus. How do you keep an organization focused? Because part of you as a top leader, you have to say, hey, here's where we're going. Here's the cool vision, and this is why we're doing it. And then over here, let's operate and execute efficiently, productively, safely, whatever that might be. And those are two really hard things to do. And so, again, I always think at the top of the house, the CEO should have a think list, not a to-do list. And, most of the CEOs I work with have a really messy office with a crap ton of papers and all kinds of stuff. In the best CEOs that I see have a whiteboard full of Stoic philosophy and values and culture and big picture stuff. And how the company's going to survive 20 or 100 or 1,000 years, not just how are we going to get to the exit in 3 years.
Yeah, that's a big difference. And the irony of that is both of them, the long-term one can still get you to that exit. And more effectively too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I remember interviewing Jeff Pfeffer from Stanford, and I asked him, who's a guy that's an expert on power and influence. And I said, well, what do you think the best definition of leadership is? And he said, you know what? It depends on what the organization needs. And I thought, that's, again, different situations, different organizations. I mean, I have more than a few financial services clients and more than a few construction clients, and they have a lot of similarities. And but the way that you lead in each of those are really different. Really different. And I see that with the pure white collar organizations and versus the hybrid blue collar white collar. There's a huge divide in how those organizations are run and the problems that they have. And so that, to me, again, all that stuff is really interesting.
Well, it is. And it goes back to the, would Vince Lombardi be successful, in 2025? And, it also reminds me of one of my bosses in group who, as a battalion commander, he was good. He was really good. But as a team leader and a battalion and a company commander, he sucked. I mean, it's how he got promoted and selected for battalion commander. Talking with guys, because I wasn't present for the previous ones, right? But talking to guys who knew him in those lower positions, I was always like, well, how the hell did he get promoted? Because of the stories I heard.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting aspect of, you could even use the analogy, Jim Collins' analogy of the right people in the right seats on the right bus sort of thing.
Yep, exactly.
So what do you do in your role as that executive coach when you go, ooh, dude, you've either exceeded your capacity and capability by being CEO, or that director or VP or whatever, kind of the same thing, maybe needs to go up.
Yeah, fortunately, I'm not very often in a situation where, I think somebody's Peter Principled out, reach their highest level of incompetence. But I do see people struggling. And at the lower levels, at the mid levels, I do see sometimes people that realize, they're in trouble career wise. Like all of a sudden, they're not hitting their numbers, or they've ticked somebody off, or, and I always say, you got three choices here, pal. You got, you can suck it up and be a good soldier. You can try to fix it, change it, adapt, influence, or you can leave. And I would hope that you would try to fix it before you leave. But there are times when it's like, hey, just because you're a perfect fit when you joined the company 3 years ago doesn't mean you are going to be a perfect fit today, or that the company is going to be a perfect fit for you. So I have found that there are times when I'm trying to help people realize, because, the people I coach are at a point where if they're not succeeding, they can't go sideways or go down. They've got to move along. And, right now in this environment, I would not want to be on the street, because everybody I know that's looking to hire people do not want to hire somebody that's unemployed. Mm-hmm. They want to poach from another company. They do not want to hire somebody that's on the street. So if anybody's listening and feels like they're on the street, my advice is, make sure you're networking and getting warm introductions, not just sending stuff out willy-nilly, and that's important. And that's a good reminder for the other people that are employed is dig your well before you're thirsty.
Yeah.
Make time all the time to meet people, talk to people, help people, to be a net giver, not a net taker. And, and that is your only insurance policy. If you're not an entrepreneur, is you've got to have a great network of people that want to see you succeed.
Do you think that like you were saying of wanting to hire from somebody who's already employed, that kind of thing? Do you think that's a evolution or like the next step of growth from what we saw over the last few years of the quiet quitting, the job hopping? There's a lot of people at our point in my generation. It's like I'm staying at the job for a year, go to the next one because I got a dollar raise, all that kind of stuff. There. Do you think this is a trickle down of that?
Yeah, I think, it's like cyclical. During the pandemic, you could job hop and you're going to get a 15, 25% raise, and you could do that. And employers were kissing employees' butts. And there's still a little bit of that right now. Like, I don't want to be hard on this guy because I don't want to quit. I'm like, where's he going to go? Right now, the market is tough. So I think, what I'm seeing, with the Gallup survey again, a year ago, engagement in the United States was 33%. It's now down to 31%. I think for managers, if I'm right, don't quote me, it's down to 27%. So one quarter to one third of people actually, are getting after it. And the other people are just kind of down it in, which, if it comes to the time when somebody needs to make cuts, I guarantee the last person they're going to cut is somebody that has a great attitude and has a great work ethic. I don't care how good you are or not good you are, but if you work hard and you have a great attitude, you're going to be one of the last to go. So I think you've got to do that. You have to take personal responsibility. And let's say your boss is terrible, the environment's terrible, then you have to decide, am I going to suck it up? Am I going to change it? I'm going to make it work. Is the grass really greener? But you have a personal responsibility of those around you to be positive and to uplift them no matter what. And the company has a responsibility to create a great environment as well. And, most bosses are overwhelmed. They're not spending the time one-on-one to develop people. Half the managers out there have never been through any sort of leadership development at all. They're just good at what they did. Because it doesn't mean, it's like, just because you're smart in science doesn't mean you're going to be a great professor in college. Some of the smartest people are the worst teachers. Some of the best salespeople are the worst sales managers. Mm-hmm. And so, part of that is really figuring out what drives you. I guarantee the three of us love developing people. We love when we hear from somebody we worked with 10 years ago that says, hey, I still remember, you taught me this, or you kicked me in the butt, and here's where I'm at now. That's why we do what we do. I guarantee none of us go, well, when I sold that $50 million project, man, that was the happiest day of my life. If you're that guy, then keep selling. If you're a guy that likes to invent stuff or likes to write code, keep doing that. But if you love developing people and coaching and seeing people grow, then, be a student of leadership and take on more responsibility. I think the benefits will outweigh the down days. But the other thing I'll say is, if you're going to do that, you have to know that you have to sacrifice yourself, your time, more than other people. And if you're not willing to work harder and make sacrifices, then, you shouldn't be in leadership. Because, as my son said, when I teased him and said, hey, you're an expert on leadership, what do you know? He was 22 years old. He said, you know what, Dad, I know it's not about me. And that's the truth. What we know about leadership is it's not about me. It's about you serving other people and you trying to help people grow and develop. And again, you have to give of yourself a lot. And if you think you're going to work 40 hours a week and be a great boss, you're sadly mistaken, and you shouldn't take the role.
Very, very naive.
Yeah.
Talking about developing people, and we talked about coachability earlier and how that is like a big identifier to develop somebody. The other thing that I think is really interesting with that is, it's like identifying when they actually hit that ceiling. I could use, from my rugby example in the sports world, it's like this kind of funny thing that happens where it's like you kind of get to this point and it's just like the mechanic who's so good that you make him a manager, where you get a guy like, oh, he looked pretty good all week in practice. Then you throw him out on Saturday against BYU and he gets smacked around for 80 minutes and you go, oh, he's not that good. He's down. Okay, we found the ceiling. It's right here. Do you think that like failure is a part of that process? Do you have to hit your head on that ceiling, or do you think a good leader can, be a little bit more strategic there?
I think it's about the leaders knowing the difference in performance and potential. Performance is a combination of producing results and delivering the behaviors according to core values. That's what performance is. Both, how you show up, your behaviors, and what you produce. Potential is, and when I think of it in simple terms. Can I see this person 2 levels above where they are today? Do they ask lots of strategic questions? Are they curious? Do they have the respect, and are they networked within the company? In other words, if this person gets promoted, is everyone going to go, yeah? And most organizations I work with see potential as performance. Hey, this guy's really good, or this gal's really good at this. We should make him a manager, instead of saying, hey, what's the criteria by which we will evaluate potential? And part of it, and go back to Stan McChrystal, who said, hey, he told me once, he goes, I'm not sure what makes a leader, but I know this. Every one of them do this. Pick me. And if people aren't raising their hand and saying, I want more responsibility, then why talk them into it? So I think that's what's important. I think it's a leadership responsibility. And again, I guarantee all 3 of us at different points in our career went, pick me. Hey, just so you know, I want to get promoted. What do I need to do to get promoted? We all ask that question of our bosses. And if people aren't asking that, it's like you can't make somebody have that desire. I coach a guy, Steve House, or I coached a guy, Steve House, who has uphill athlete, and his T-shirts say, "You can't coach desire."
Yeah,
and I think that's true.
I love that. I was just going to say, it's funny because it's like a cliche of, I can't coach effort. I can't coach effort. My buddies all make that joke about me coaching rugby. And then every now and then I get to a point, it's like, shit, I really can't coach effort.
Yeah, it's, that fire has to burn within.
Yeah, it does. And that's a different differentiator between being good and becoming great, is that desire. It really is. Whether you're an athlete or a business owner, it burns inside of you, and ain't nobody going to make it. You got to make it yourself. Yep. So, and in that burning desire of getting better and growing and learning more, for me, what I learned is the rephrasing of what I say way too much. Sometimes I say it a lot because I like to remind myself of it. But it is that willingness to face your own hypocrisy. It's just such a powerful thing. I feel like maybe I'll get me I'm not a big note card Post-it sort of guy, but maybe that's probably worth putting on a note card that sits somewhere on the desk to remind you of that. And I think that's pretty powerful.
Well, Otis, you're a dad, obviously, and as a dad, you've told your kids a ton of times all kinds of stuff that you were like, I can't believe that these words are coming out of my mouth.
Oh yeah, yep, no doubt. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
I'm just laughing because I've had this moment a couple times where I'm coaching something. Like, hey, you could never do that to somebody during game, and then I'm just waiting one day for somebody to find old game film of me and be like, Coach, I saw you punch a guy. No, I didn't. I would never. That is against the rules. Come on. But no, one thing interesting talking about the oh my gosh, I'm blanking what this originally came from, so I'm just going to tell the thing it made me think of. Talking about, the decision matrix, identifying those different metrics and all that kind of stuff. Well, the class I used that for, really interesting thing, went to a Whole Foods, designed this big farm to go on top of their Whole Foods, grow all their food and all this kind of stuff. And the guy was so excited when I was in school. And then I went to talk to him 3 months later when I was the director of operations for a farm. And he wasn't very excited. And I think there's an interesting piece there of the academic yes versus the real world yes. And I wanted to chase that rabbit with y'all, but instead it's just a what I learned thing. So maybe we'll do a whiskey words on it one day.
There you go. There you go. Jan, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
You guys are really good interviewers and asking questions. And, we know about the power of the question, but I think you guys reinforced to me how powerful the follow-on questions are, how that indicates really great listening and that you're able to dig deeper into topics. And, again, we know as leaders, if we ask the right questions versus tell, we can really gain commitment and engagement in a different way. And again, I think, you guys demonstrated that in this interview. That's what we need to do as coaches. Not just tell people what to do, but ask and understand motivations, where they're coming from, what they're afraid of, how they got there, where they want to go. And that's how we can get people to reach their potential and grow our organizations, however we define that.
Awesome. Jan, how do folks find you, sign up for the next Crucible and see what you got going on?
Yep. Self-ReliantLeadership.com is our website. And we've got a new book out. We've got the podcast, the leadership podcast. And as I said before, what I'm trying to do is put out there things that will stimulate conversations and, really help people. And I'm going to just be really candid and frank. My business is, I'm so grateful for where my business is today. And, I want to keep doing great work. I'm not I'm like, oh boy, I've got to grow my business. I've got to get more clients. I got to do this. Things are really good and I'm very content. And I just want to keep helping people. And I want to work with people that really possess heroic aspirations beyond power and money, and that really want to grow people, to grow their organizations. That's what I want to keep doing. And I just feel really fortunate in that, going back to the Green Beret thing, that was the greatest gift, that I've ever gotten was, the opportunity to go through that course, to achieve something. And then, it was kind of like, all right, now what are you going to do with it now that you did it? I didn't stay in 20 and retire like a lot of folks, but I think what I took away was the real tenet of special forces, and that is de oppresso libera, which is to free the oppressed. And translated to the business world, civilian life is, to be a force multiplier. That's what we were trained to do. And I think I've continued that mission without wearing a green beanie.
Awesome. Jan, we really appreciate you taking time today to spend it with us.
Oh, it's a really honor, privilege. I love how you guys, I love the dynamic between the two of you. And what a privilege you have, Otis, to have your son with you.
Awesome. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Camden and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Jan Rutherford, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.